Addis Media Network. I am teacher Mastal bringing you this class. Today's topic is the present perfect tense. But before we talk about today's topic, let us go to the previous class and do a quick revision. If you remember, in the previous class, we talked about the active and passive voice. What did we say earlier about the active and passive voice? When do we use the active voice and when do we use the passive voice? If you remember what we talked about last time, we said the active voice is used when we want to talk about the subject doing the action. So the subject is the doer of the action, and we focus on the subject instead of what is happening in the action. But when it comes to the passive voice, what we focus on is what? The action itself. So let's see a few examples and remember what we talked about last time. For example, if it is an active voice, we can say, the cat sat on the mat. So this is what? An active voice, and it focuses more on the subject doing the action instead of the action itself. So that is why it is an active sentence or an active voice. What about if it is a passive voice? If it is a passive voice, we focus more on the action itself. For example, the house was cleaned by her. So here we focus more on what? The action. That is what passive voice is all about. And the way to differentiate a passive and an active voice is by the tense or verb formation that they use. For example, in the active voice, we have first subject, and then we have our verb, and then we have an object. But that is how we usually use active sentences, or how we form active sentences. We have the subject first, and then we have our verb, and then we have our object. But when it comes to passive, it changes, it shifts. The object comes first, and then we have our verb, and then the subject later on. But in this case, when it is passive voice, we have verb to be's, as you can see here. We have verb to be's with the past participle form of the verb. That is how you form a passive voice or a passive sentence. And we said many others about an active voice. And that is all to remind us of what we did last time. Let us go to today's class, which is the present perfect tense. The present perfect tense. If you remember the other day also, we talked about the past perfect tense. And today we're going to talk about the present perfect tense. What is the present perfect tense? The present perfect tense is one of the four verb forms of the present tense. One of the four forms. So last time, if you remember when we were talking about the past perfect tense, we also said it is one of the four verb forms of the past tense. In this case, the present perfect tense is what? One of the four forms of the present tense. So what are the other forms? Let's see them quickly. Simple present tense. We have the simple present tense. We have the present continuous tense. And we have today's topic, which is the present perfect tense. And finally, we have the present perfect continuous tense. It looks very similar to what we discussed about last time, if you remember, when we were talking about the past perfect tense. So the simple present tense, let's give a quick example. I wash my face every morning. A habitual action, things that we do repeatedly. What about the present continuous? She is going to school. She's going to school. Is going here. And in the first one, wash, the first verb form or the root verb form, we use it in the simple present tense. And in the present continuous, we use the verb to be with the ing form of the verb. In the present perfect tense, today's topic is they have gone to school. Here we have what? The auxiliary verb have with the past participle form of the verb. That is how we form the present perfect. And finally, we have the present perfect continuous. They have been going to school. So in this case, we have, again, the auxiliary verb. We have taken that from the perfect, and we have taken the ing or the continuous form of the verb, and we also have added been in the middle. That is how we form the present perfect continuous. And these are the four forms of the present tense. And today our focus is going to be on the present perfect. Okay, so what else can we say about the present perfect tense? The present perfect tense, the present perfect talks about an action that started in the past and has a connection in the present. It has a connection in the present. It also has what? An effect or a cause or a consequence in the present. So the action might have started in the past, but still has an effect, a consequence in the present time. So that is what shows, or what we show when we're using the present perfect tense. What else can we say? How to form the present perfect tense. Earlier I told you, and I will show you the form. The form is, we have the auxiliary verb have and has. We also have to have main verb, which is the past participle. Okay? So this is how we form. We have our subject first, and then we have our auxiliary verbs, depending on which our subject is. We're going to use have or has. And then we have our past participle, Or if it's in the case of irregular verbs, like go, for example, the one I gave you earlier in the example, it has changed form because it is irregular and it has become gone. But with most other verbs that are not irregular verbs, they are very similar to the simple past form of the verb. Okay, let's give an example here. For example, I have been going fishing for a long time. I have been going fishing for a long time. Have, again, we have here, and we have been, the past participle form of be, and going fishing for a long time. So this is something that started in the past, but it is ongoing. It is related to the present tense, and that is how we form the present perfect tense. We also have to be careful. Generally, we use have when we're forming the present perfect tense, except when we are using the third person singulars. Let's give an example. I have. This is what? First person. First person. Second person. You have been going fishing for a long time. You have. So here again, we used what? Have when it is the second person. What about third person plural? Third person plural. They have or we have completed their assignment. So here again, what? We have used they have, or we can change this into we have, which is the first person plural. But we change, if you see here, we have been using have until this point, but we change it to has when we use the third person singular. The third person singular is what? He, she, and it. If that is the case, we use has. For example, has seen the show. If you see here, we have changed it into has. So that is one rule you must follow when you're using the present perfect tense in a sentence. We generally use the auxiliary verb have when we are making the present perfect, unless we are using, if our subject is third person singular, he, she, it, and then we use have. That is the form and that is the rule. What about, for example, when we want to make it a question, when we want to use a question using the present perfect tense? If it is a question, for example, we bring all the time, if you are asking a question using the present perfect tense, and then the auxiliary verb or the helping verb have or has, it comes what? First. For example, have you studied for the exam? Question mark. Have you studied for the exam? So if you see here, what comes first? The auxiliary verb have comes first, and then it is followed by the subject, you. Have you studied, and then you have your verb, which is the past participle form. This is how you form a question when you are using the present perfect tense. And what about if it's a negative sentence? Let's say a negative sentence. They have not. What comes after your auxiliary verb? It is the negative indicator. They have not completed their assignment. So here we have, and then not. This is how you form a negative sentence in the present perfect tense. You have your auxiliary verb and then the negative form and then completed. You cannot say, for example, they have completed not their assignment. This is not the correct way of forming a negative present perfect tense, okay? This is not a negative way. Not, the negative indicator does not come after your verb. It comes, your main verb. It comes before your main verb, and it is between your auxiliary verb and your main verb. And this is how you form questions and also negative ideas in the present perfect form. Okay. So in what situations do we use the present perfect form? We use it in three main ways to explain or to talk in situations in the present perfect. Let's see them. The first one is repeated actions between the present, the past, and the present. The past and the present. That is the first one. Repeated actions or action between the past and the present. So in this case, actions are repeated starting from one point in the past to the present, okay? Starting from one point in time an action is repeated. And that action that's repeated is what's related to the present time. Let's give an example. For example, I have visited. Don't forget, we have our auxiliary verb and then we have our main verb, which is the past participle form. I have visited since this is a regular verb, it is very similar to the simple past form. Visited and then visited. It is the same. Since it is regular, it doesn't change form after its simple past form. Okay, I have visited, let's say, London for several times. So, here, I have visited is what? An indicator of the present perfect tense, but it added here what? We have given it repetition. We have said several times, and that is showing us that this action was not completed at one point in the past, but has been repeated throughout. And the most important fact here is not that the most important fact is that it is repeated instead of how many times. That is not the important thing here. We don't want to know how many times. That is not the important issue. But the importance here that this action has been repeated several times. That is the main focus. Another example. Can I have an example? She has read that book series many times. Again, here, if you see, we have a repetition of actions, right? So she has read that book series many times. Again, we have what? A repetition of action. The third example, we have played basketball every week since last summer. Okay, so the same here. We have played, we have our rules, and we have followed them. We have played basketball. What is the importance here? Every week. Every week. That is the importance here. It's showing us repetition. An action that is happened, but still happening, still ongoing. So that is what the first indicator is, or the first way of using the present perfect tense. What about the second? The second one is a completed action in the recent past. So in this case, the action has been completed, but it is in the recent past. Let's give an example. An example. I have just finished my homework. My homework. So if you see here, it is, we have added another time expression, time indication expression, which is just. Earlier when we talked about the first one, we gave many times, several times, every weekend, every, many, never. These are all what? Time expressions, and we use them to talk about repetition. In this case, we have used just here to talk about what? To talk about recent activities, things that we have completed very recently, and that shows us that it is very related to the present, even though the action is completed. Another one. They have already completed their project. They have already completed their project. So again, we have our auxiliary verb, and then we have our time indicator, and then we have our verb, their project. So our focus here is what? That the action has been recently completed. That is what we are focusing on. Not in the first case, in the first one, we were focusing on how the action was repeated. But in this case, our focus is what? On, even though the action happened and completed, but it is very recent. So it is very recent. If that is the case, then it is related to the present. Okay, I will give you one other example. Okay, she has broken her arm. In this case, we didn't give any time indicator, but this shows you what? If I say she has broken her arm, the action has been completed and finished, but if she has broken her arm, that means it's still broken. So that is what it's showing us, that the action is still, even though it happened, the action happened, the consequence is still here, the effect is still here. So that is what we mean to say that we're going to use the present perfect to talk about a completed action in the recent past. The third one is, the third and finally the last one is, or this is, I think this is the most common one that people use, is to talk about or discuss about actions that started in the past and continue to the present. So this is the most common one that people use when people are using the present perfect tense. Okay, let's give an example. This is talking about an action that started earlier on, previously, but still continuing to this point in time. Okay, let's see. I have been learning English for the past 2 years. If that is the case, the action has started before, but it is continuing. The action is still being performed. You are still learning that language. If that is the case, we also use another time indicator here, which is time expression indicator here, which is for. So it is telling us for that long a time we have been doing that action. We have been performing that action. So even though the action started 2 years ago, it's still ongoing. What else? What other example can we give? She has known him since their childhood. So an action that began, or a situation that began earlier on when they were children, but they still know each other. They still know each other. That means it has continuation. Another example. They have been married for the past 20 years. Again, if you see here, they have been married and they have been living together for a long time. They started living together, or they got married a long time ago, which is what? 20 years ago. But still they are together. So again, another time indicator expression, since, for. And when we are trying to talk about an action that started in the past and still continue, we use the time expression indicators, the common time expression indicators, for and since, to show continuation of an action. So these are the 3 ways you could use the present perfect tense to talk about in different situations. Now let's see a few exercises and see how well you do. Okay. Complete the following sentences with the correct present perfect form. Number 1. she blank finish her homework? Number 2, they blank not study for the exam. Number 3, I blank visit Bahadar several times. We blank know each other since childhood. They blank live in this town for 5 years. Okay, I think this is enough. I will give you 4 minutes to complete this assignment, and then we will do it together. Okay, I'm sure you all did a wonderful job completing these sentences, and I'm sure you all got them correct. And let's see them together and see how well you did. The first one, she finished. Our verb, our main verb is finish, so we have to use an auxiliary verb. That is a must. So after our subject, we have what? She has. Because she is third person singular, we're going to use the auxiliary verb has. She has, our verb is going to be changed into its past participle form. She has finished her homework. The second one, they, we have a negative form here. They not study. So, they have not, and then we change our verb into its past participle form. They have not studied for the exam. Okay, what about the third one? I have visited Bahardar several times. Things that has happened repeatedly over a point of time. Number 4, we have again. We have known each other since childhood. Again, this is something that has began in the past but still continues to the present. Finally, they have lived in this town for 5 years. Again, this is an action that started happening a few years back, but still continuing to the present. So that is all that we can discuss about the present perfect for today. I'm sure all of you have learned a lot of things and have exercised, and I'm sure you will practice more in the future. And thank you all for tuning in today, and I hope you join us for next class and have a good time.